I love pictures. I learn a lot from them. They're very instructive. The difficult part is that so many of our family photographs, little snapshots, formal pictures, have no information on them. So often we don't know who the people are, when the picture was taken, where it was taken. But part of my research is taking those pictures without information and showing them to relatives or people that I'm interviewing. And they can identify people in the photographs. And as they do that, they remember anecdotes and stories and experiences they've had with the people. So that's a way of using photographs to elicit and elaborate oral history. If people have the photographs, oh yeah, I remember being there. I remember so-and-so being there. But they didn't have the photographs, it wouldn't trigger those memories. So photographs are very, very important. And that's why you see so many in at least those 3 books, other books that I've written.
Let's talk about Martha's Vineyard now, because this is your current home.
I've been here year-round, full-time, for about 10 years now. But I was invited for a weekend in 1961 by Jane and Steve Edmonds from Sharon, Massachusetts. One weekend. My wife and I, somehow the children were back home. And I kept coming every summer, 1962, 63, throughout the 60s, throughout the 70s, throughout the 80s. We'd come every summer, 2 or 3 weeks, the family, and we'd rent. And that's still going on. It's still going on. I have 3 adult children. They're in and out of here all the time. 5 grandkids. They love it here. So we're, what, 3rd generation now here on Martha's Vineyard. I've been stimulated by the history of Martha's Vineyard by meeting so many people, particularly like your lately deceased father-in-law, Jim McLaurin. He was first a friend, just a friend. We got to know each other at the Senior Center here. When I formed the Martha's Vineyard branch of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, one of the first members and one of the first persons to be engaged and wanting to join was the late Jim McLaurin. And he was a staunch member of this branch. I wasn't aware at the time that he was a Tuskegee Airman. But then I learned a lot about Tuskegee and about the Tuskegee Airmen. And I learned that through Jim. And I've learned so much from so many people here on this island. People who've been here, families have been here 3 or 4 generations. Jim McLaurin being one example. So people here have fed me a lot of information. I've been aggressive in going out and getting the information for my book on Martha's Vineyard. And people have been very open, sharing photographs and information. But I'm learning new stuff every single day. Every single day. Just yesterday, doing my Black History Tour, which I do here on the island, a white lady came out of her house on her porch yesterday. I had a group of 8 black people on my tour, and she said, "Would you come over here a minute?" The house that she lives in, over here at the corner of Wesleyan Avenue and Church Avenue at Baptist Temple Park, she bought from a black gentleman back in the 1980s. I had never heard of him before. His name was Clifton Hardy. And she brings out his journals, his business cards, his checkbooks. Clifton Hardy was an employee of the U.S. Treasury Department based in Paris, France. All the stuff she gave me had Paris, France addresses on it. Here's another black personality who lived here in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that I just learned about yesterday from a white lady who bought the house and all the stuff was in the house. So my experiences here on Martha's Vineyard have just been astounding, absolutely astounding. So I've written about it, and the book is out of print right now, and I hope somebody else will pick up where I left off and continue our history.
So how did black people come to Vineyard?
My book, African Americans on Martha's Vineyard, was typeset, designed, laid out, photographs were cropped and placed in the book, and the book was printed right here on Martha's Vineyard at the Rosa Printing on Circuit Avenue. You may be familiar with it. In the spring of 1999, I went into the Rosas to see how the publication of the first edition was coming. And this white gentleman was working at a huge table. It was like a big pool table. I walked in and said, "Well, this is fascinating. This is interesting. This is going to be a big seller." And then he asked me a very interesting question. He said, "How far back does the book go?" I said, "Well, it goes back to the 1700s." He said, 1700s? I said, yeah. He said, there were black people here then? I said, yes. I said, they were enslaved. And he kind of jumped. He said, slaves on this island? He was shocked. Even some black folks are surprised that slavery existed here on this island. Okay? So you asked me, how did we get here? How were we first here? We were here as, quote, Negro property. Slavery ended on Martha's Vineyard in 1783. And when the first census was taken, the U.S. count, in 1790, they counted 39 blacks on Martha's Vineyard. Now, post-1783, up until about 1850, there were black men and women, but mostly men here, working as sailors, working on the whaling ships, the fishing ships. They were farmers. Much of Oak Bluffs and much of the island was farmland. We didn't own the land, we didn't own the farms. The white settlers owned the farms, but we worked here as farmers. And most importantly, there were black men here who were craftsmen. If you go into the Methodist campgrounds in central Oak Bluffs today, and even outside, many of those campground houses were built by black carpenters. Much of the fancy woodwork, we call it millwork, on the gingerbread houses. You familiar with the campground? Were done by black carpenters, okay? So that's the next wave, okay? They came both fugitive and free. Just before the Civil War and just after the Civil War, many of the Methodist men who founded the campgrounds were men with money. We call them developers today. They developed the malls and the highways. They came in and envisioned all of this neighborhood that we enjoy today as an upscale summer resort area, invested in developing the hotels and all the recreation that we have and so on. And so you had now a black working class. 7 huge hotels were built here between 1860 and 1880. Think of all the work in 7 big hotels. The Wesley Hotel, that I'm sure you're familiar with, is the last of the 7 still to exist. So now we have, post-Civil War, a very solid, expanding black working class. Individual black men and women coming here for summer employment, and then many of them finding employment in the year-round economy. By the late 1800s, you had blacks who became working class and then leisure class. They began to acquire homes off the campgrounds. They began building their own little cottages. And by the turn of the century, and before and right after World War I, you had an expanding black leisure class. And that has continued right up to the present. The other thing that's happening that people should know is that when I started coming here in '61, all through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, most of the black folks that I got to know, most of my close friends, all came from Washington, D.C. on up. I call them my East Coast phenomenon. Washington, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jerseyites, people from New York, and all of New England. In the last 6 to 10 years, African-American peoples are coming from all over the country to this island. You may have experienced this, but I have, because I'm here year-round, and I do the Black History Tour. Blacks are now coming from Miami, Texas, California, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Chicago. Never met folks in Mid-America, the West Coast coming here, and it's very, very noticeable. And they're not just passing through, they're calling way ahead of time to make reservations, to find a guest house, to find a place to stay. That's a whole new wave of African-American people, personalities, and culture that are coming to this island. And lastly, and I'm part of this group, the black retirement community here has been growing like this the last 10 or 12 years, okay? If you look at the 1990 census and the 2000 census, the black population in Edgartown and Tisbury went up 3% in those 2 towns. Now 3% to a lot of people is a small number. That's a considerable number, increase in the black population in just 2 towns. And I attribute that, and I can document it, to blacks who are retiring here. And I'm one of them, so I know most of these people. So I hope that answers your question about...
So there are 6 cities,
6 towns. 6 towns.
On Martha's Vineyard.
On the island, yeah.
And which of the towns are the most populated with African Americans?
Clearly Oak Bluffs. It always has been. There's been a lot of diversity here, a lot of tolerance here. It's been easy to get to. Edgartown, Chilmark are very wealthy towns, rather exclusive, I think. But Oak Bluffs has always been kind of open and regular and popular. So I would say that the majority of the people of color on the island are living in Oak Bluffs. But you know, you have to talk about people of color on this island because remember that the Native Americans, the Wampanoags, were here beginning in 1400. Then you had a large contingent of immigrants from the Cape Verde Islands. And there were a lot of Cape Verdean peoples here on this island today. And as you know, from Providence to Cape Cod and Provincetown, there were probably 25,000 Cape Verdeans. So you have Cape Verdeans of African ancestry, and then you have i.e. black or African Americans. And as you know, those three groups of African ethnicity have intermixed and intermarried. So you have people of color, you have people who may have Native American and black ancestry. They may have Cape Verdean and Native American ancestry. So when you talk about the African American or people of color here, you have to use that term. There were 16,000 people here on the island, as you probably know, year-round. I would say that during off-season, while I'm here off-season, there are probably about 1,300 people of color. I would say at the peak part of the summer, there are probably upwards of 3,500 people of color on this island who come for day trips, weekends, weeks, to visit relatives and friends, okay? And that's over the course of the summer, to give you some perspective on that community. We have a large number of people of color who own second homes, these seasonal homeowners. If you look at my African American history group that I have on the island, I'm the founding president of the branch of the Association for the Study of African American History on this island. I would say 80% of my members are seasonal residents. This is their second home. They're here for 2 or 3 months. After Labor Day, they're going back home to New York, New Jersey, Sarasota, Florida, just to give you some perspective.
So, you know, a lot of people wonder, Martha's Vineyard, how did this island get that name? So can we start with that?
Very easy, simple question. Answer. Bartholomew Gosnold is known as the Christopher Columbus of Martha's Vineyard. And when he came, he's an Englishman, when he came on his ship, okay, what did he see but vineyards? Right? Grapes all over the island. He had a daughter, her name was Martha. And so he called it Martha's Vineyard. There's a white historian who wrote a book on the history of the island. He wrote a book, came out 3 years ago, and I went to his book signing, and somebody asked him the same question. Where did the name Martha's Vineyard come from? So he gave the same answer that I just shared with you. And then he said, tongue-in-cheek, thank God her name wasn't Penelope. Can you imagine Penelope Vineyard?